Today we will watch a video on section 5.5. First you want to go to your journal page and copy down the definition for domain. Then let's look at the core concept. Here you can see addition operation can be defined as f plus g of x. And all you're basically doing is adding like terms. For subtraction, you'll be subtracting terms. Don't forget though to distribute a negative. Then we have multiplication and division. The domain for each of these is going to be the domain for both f and g together. Now let's look at the examples. Well, now look at example 1. In example 1, we're going to take the functions f and g, and they want us to add the two together. So all you're going to do is take function f, 3 radical x, and add it to function g, negative 10 radical x. Or simply add like terms. Since they both have like radicals, we can just add their coefficients 3 and negative 10 and get negative 7 radical x. They also want us to state the domain. Because it's a square root function, what is under a square root has to be greater than or equal to 0 for the f function and for the g function. So for the combined function, it's also x is greater than or equal to 0. Then they want us to evaluate for 4, and that just simply means plug in 4 for the x. Square root of 4 is 2, so we get an answer of negative 14. Now let's try subtracting. We're going to be subtracting f and then minus g. So I'm going to copy down the f function, and I'm going to subtract the entire g function. Don't forget that when we subtract, we're going to have to distribute our negative to the entire g function. Now that I've distributed my negative, I can simply add like terms. So add your cubes together, your squares together, any x terms, and your constants. We then need to talk about the domain. The domain for any polynomial is all real numbers, and since f is a polynomial and g is a polynomial, together the domain will still be all real numbers. Now let's evaluate for when x is negative 2, and that just means we're going to plug negative 2 in for all our x's. So negative 2 cubed is 8, times 2 is 16, negative 2 squared is 4, negative 4 times negative 2 is 8, plus our 7, and then you can add, this would be negative 16, and then add across, we get negative 12, negative 4 plus 7, you'll get an answer of 3. Now let's look at multiplying two functions. We're going to be multiplying f times g, so we have function f times function g. Now it might be a little tricky to multiply with a radical, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the square root as a power. Remember, it's power over root, so it's really x to the half. And when you multiply, you're going to add exponents. So 2 plus a half, you'll have to make common denominators and get x to the 5 halves. Now the domain. Since we have a square root function, the domain for a square root says x must be greater than or equal to 0. And now let's evaluate. Plugging 9 in, we can rewrite it so I can solve without a calculator. And we get 9 to the 5th power square root. Square root of 9 will be 3, 3 to the 5th will be 32. Lastly, we have dividing two functions. So first we have function f divided by function g. You might want to look at the domain first. The domain for f is a polynomial, so it's all real numbers. For g, because it's an even root, we want all numbers greater than or equal to 0. But now if I notice in my denominator, x is in the bottom, so I'm not allowed to equal 0 too. So my final domain is going to be x must be greater than 0. But let's simplify this division. I have x's on top and bottom, so when we divide we're going to subtract exponents, so we're going to do 1 minus 3/4. And 1 take away 3/4 will be 1/4. We can then evaluate by plugging 16 in. 16 to the 1/4 is really the 4th root of 16, which is 2. So 6 times 2 will get 12. We'll then complete the modern progress questions in class.